Very good evening to you. You are watching Ebru Africa Primetime News. It is, of course, the 2nd of September 2014. My name is Michelle Morgan, and here's a look at some of the stories coming up this hour. The African Union heads of state meet in Nairobi to discuss security and combating terrorism across the continent.
International Criminal Court is now in session.
An ICC prosecution witness who failed to testify yesterday, citing various reasons, has until Thursday to provide testimony. Diplomatic nominees and the National Intelligence Service Director nominee undergo
He was put to task on his suitability to take over from outgoing spy chief.
And the U.S. carries out a military operation against Al-Shabaab militants in Somalia. The National Assembly has today started the process of vetting nominees to the position of Director General of the National Intelligence Service. Major General Philip Wachira Kameru was nominated by the President to take over from the outgoing Director General, Major General Michael Gishangi, who resigned, citing personal reasons.
The National Intelligence Service Director General nominee, Major General Philip Kameru, was the first in the hot seat. He was put to task on his suitability to take over from outgoing Spy Chief Director Major General Michael Gishangi.
The understanding of security environment and the understanding of the KDF in the security environment are similar. So I'm not going to a strange environment.
Kameru says he'll protect the democracy of state, arguing that he has the necessary skills, having been at the helm of the military intelligence since 2006.
The current assignment I'm dealing with, most of it is dealing with our KDF soldiers who are operating in Somalia. And so there's no better practical experience than supporting troops who are fighting a war and ensuring that they succeed in what they are doing. And this is what I've been doing.
Second to face the panel was former Foreign Affairs Minister Sam Ongeri, who was put to task to explain his suitability to become the permanent representative to the UN Habitat.
Once we succeed, like we have done with the UNEP, in lobbying the rest of the capitals in the world, then we have an opportunity as a nation to again have yet another UN headquarters here in the form of a habitat.
Ongeri says he'll focus on interfacing Vision 2030 and the Millennium Development Goals if his appointment goes through. On his part, former Transport Minister and at one time the Kenya High Commissioner to Zimbabwe, Chirao Ali Makwere, will have a hard time in restoring Kenya's bilateral relations with Tanzania, relations that have soured over time.
The old days of political diplomacy will not make countries achieve that economic superiority. So I consider that as the most important sector in our economic relations. Economic diplomacy, trade, investments.
The recent nominations have led to an outcry from the youth who say they feel sidelined and overlooked in appointments, but the nominees think otherwise.
Those people, the critics, that say that you're getting tired, you're old, what will you tell them?
Would it not be fine with you if we asked you to decline this appointment and ask the Jubilee administration to probably consider other young Kenyans? I'm happy that you have children who are professors.
How will it look like, you know, the very junior officers, some of them you recruited in the ministry, are now the ones who are going to supervise him as an ambassador. And
what do you think is the right time for somebody to retire from public service?
The most basic criteria is the concept of servant leadership, not the lordship of the people.
so long as one is deemed useful and one is still useful in society. And I think I'm still useful. I think it's right and proper that one is given.
Former Finance Minister Robinson Njero Githae and MP Kiema Kilonzo, who have been nominated as the new Kenyan ambassador to the US and Turkey, respectively, were also vetted. Reporting for Ebru Africa, I'm Sam Gakunyi.
Member of Parliament.
An ICC prosecution witness who failed to testify yesterday, citing various reasons, has until Thursday to get ready. The witness, through his lawyer, Jeffrey Mutai, said he was not feeling well and also wanted to be given 21 days to get crucial documents from the office of the prosecution. The witness is undergoing special tests to verify his status.
The chamber will now render a ruling on Mr. Mutai's application for the postponement of the witness's testimony that was scheduled to commence yesterday, the 1st of September 2014. The application was to postpone it for 21 days. The chamber has taken note of the preliminary assessment provided by the VWU, as well as the submissions of each of the parties and participants, including those made on behalf of the witness. The chamber notes that all appeared to be in agreement that some period of postponement was necessary in the circumstances prior to the commencement of the testimony, to the extent that the testimony could not fairly commence yesterday as scheduled. The chamber hereby therefore grants in part the application for postponement of the witness's testimony, but the chamber directs that the testimony shall commence on Thursday, the 4th of September 2014 at 9:30 a.m. The Hague time, which we understand to be 10:30 a.m. Nairobi time.
African governments have been urged to combine their efforts to put together resources to help combat terrorism. In an African Union Peace and Security Council summit, graced by presidents and delegates, the leaders were urged to address social issues that spark terrorism activities. Akisa Wandera with more on that story.
Barely a week after African security and intelligence chiefs converged in Nairobi to discuss rising insecurity, another high-profile security meeting was held today with a number of heads of states and delegates present. With an agenda to find solutions to terrorism once and for all, the leaders took to the stand, pledging their country's commitment to the war on terror. Nigerian President Jonathan Goodluck insisted on the need for African countries and the international community to work together towards this cause. According to Goodluck, who is facing a hard time tackling the Boko Haram militia, African countries need to pool their resources together to fight terrorism.
Indeed, the problem we are confronting is global in nature. Terrorists and organized crime syndicates operate in networks that can only be defeated through concerted action and cooperation. The African Union and its various instruments and mechanisms provide the framework within which we should combine our efforts and pool together our scarce resources.
President Uhuru Kenyatta reiterated on the need for African countries to not only concentrate on fighting terror, but also deal with social issues like poverty and unemployment that enhance radicalization.
We must also dwell with such issues as poverty, poor governance, and long drawn-out conflicts on our continent. It is particularly worrying in Africa today how terrorist organizations have grown both in terms of number and capability.
Outgoing NIS Director General Michael Gishange said intelligence and security chiefs who attended the CISA conference had agreed on a collective approach towards the security problem.
Because terrorism and radicalism are highly portable across borders, the African Security and Intelligence Service will have a resolve to enhance their collaboration, particularly in the area of intelligence sharing, in order to forge a collective approach to respond to the threats posed by transnational terrorist groups.
The summit was meant for African countries to agree on concrete steps meant to enhance their ongoing efforts to effectively address the threat of terrorism, including the early ratification and domestication of the relevant African Union and international instruments. The African Union Peace and Security Council meeting comes against the backdrop of escalating terrorism activities in the African continent. Now, even as member states pledge their commitment to the war on terror, a very important point has been passed across today. There is need for African countries to deal with social issues like poverty and unemployment, which make the youth very vulnerable to radicalization and extremism. For Ebro Africa News, I am Akisa Wandera at the Kenyatta International Conference Center in Nairobi.
Now, the Senate has approved the county allocation of revenue bill that authorizes counties to access 210 billion shillings allocated to them. The bill was approved by the National Assembly without any amendments. The bill will now be forwarded to the President.
Senate Speaker Ekwe Ethuro recalled the House to a special sitting Tuesday to consider the county allocation of revenue bill, which will see counties access the funds allocated to them. The Senate defended their move to pass a controversial clause requiring the Commission on Revenue Allocation to recommend to the Senate the budgetary caps on the recurrent expenditures of each county government. Some are, however, against the amendment.
There are no ceilings in this bill. There was only a recommendation that CRA can recommend ceilings with the approval of the Senate.
We must tell the nation clearly that we passed a law that says this House will have the power to determine setting of ceilings for county assemblies and county executive, recommended by CRA. The Speaker, my stand on that issue remains as it was, that we have no power to micromanage the county assemblies.
The ceilings are not there, so they are free with their budgetary items, Mr. Speaker. Sir.
The law we passed was very clear that CRA will submit recommendations. But that can only happen after the bill is enacted into law, Mr. Speaker.
What is it, Senator Tangula? And I'm on record that I opposed.
A section of senators cautioned governors against misusing funds and demanded that they should be ready to be audited.
And I think it is this House that needs now to stop that and to tell the governors, if indeed you feel the courts are part of the functions that were brought in for devolution, then they might as well sometimes go back to the courts and request for more resources.
That as we struggle hard to push these funds to you, you must take responsibility and you must be accountable. That is a responsibility. Accountability is a responsibility that you cannot run away from, and we will insist on that.
The referendum debate sneaked into the floor of the House with Senators Boni Halwale and Moses Wetangula accusing the government of trying to entice members of the county assemblies to ditch the referendum push.
Let whoever thinks he can spend 12 billion shillings of public funds to police MCS know that the Public Accounts Committee of the National Assembly and the Public Accounts Committee of the Senate will be waiting for him, and we will deal with him in accordance with this Constitution. Public funds cannot be used to please people. It must be used to cause development to take place in all the corners of Kenya.
An open secret now, Mr. Speaker, that this question of so-called ceilings is part of the gymnastics and sweeteners being offered to MCAs by certain people to lure them away from the referendum, Mr. Speaker.
The national government recently came to the rescue of counties and agreed to release 29 billion shillings to pay salaries.
I won't even take 2 minutes, I'll just take even 1 minute.
First Lady Margaret Kenyatta today handed over 8 incubators to the Pumwani Maternity Hospital with the aim of improving the survival of newborn babies. Over 180,000 preterm babies are born every year in Kenya and are at greater risk of short and longer-term complications, including disabilities and impediments in growth and mental development.
The First Lady said that expectant mothers in many parts of the country encounter barriers in accessing comprehensive maternal and child health services, with majority of the newborn deaths occurring at the time of birth and the first day of life.
The majority of newborn deaths occur at the time of birth and in the first day of life. Some are so small, so fragile, and so delicate that they weigh no more than 800 grams and are smaller than the palm of an adult hand. Because of their weight and size, their chances of survival are slim, and many times they will die if they do not receive specialized care.
The incubators will contribute to the improvement of the survival of the premature babies.
The incubators that I am handing over to this facility today are intended to contribute to the improvement of the survival of babies, especially the premature ones, and give them a chance in life. In Kenya, over 180,000 preterm babies are born every year. While all newborns require warmth, breastfeeding, protection from infection, and close monitoring, the premature baby requires an even more controlled environment.
First Lady Margaret Kenyatta also called on health sector stakeholders to ensure that there are enough incubators for the preterm babies, noting that Pumwani Maternity Hospital attends to at least 80 deliveries a day.
I call upon all the stakeholders in the health sector to team up and ensure that these services are available in all hospitals to improve the safety and survival of every single baby.
China's Deputy Ambassador to Kenya said that China is committed to protecting the health care of women and children.
China is committed to protect and promote the health care and welfare of women and children. Thanks to the relentless efforts by the Chinese government, the maternal mortality rate in China in 2013 went down to 23 per 100,000, and infant mortality rate to 9.
The First Lady said she's committed to the Beyond Zero campaign to champion not only for the children's health but also for their mothers and fathers as well.
To other stories now, and the National Police Service Commission crime detection framework is outdated and needs a complete overhaul as it lacks transparency. An audit by the Usalama Reforms Forum reveals that there has been no improvement on recorded crime outcome since 2008. It further reveals that crime is significantly underreported.
Emerging threats from terrorist groups have placed new and in some way more complicated demands on the country's intelligence agencies. The Mpeketoni killings and Westgate attack and subsequent terrorism attacks that spread in some parts of the country have also raised new legal and new policy questions and has even made political leaders mount pressure on President Uhuru Kenyatta to fire the country's top security bosses. An audit by Usalama Reforms Forum notes that the country's intelligence agencies lack professional frameworks for response to crimes by police officers, and that the National Police Service is yet to develop and implement a comprehensive national policing plan that clearly identifies crimes, management priorities for enhancing community safety and national security.
What they report on is reported crime, for example, but they don't tell you the outcome of reported crime. When people report crime in a police station, sometimes specific crimes may be dealt with differently, but those figures are never reported by the Inspector General to say, okay, we had 500,000 cases last year, this is how they were all dealt with, and these are the ones that we took to the court, and this is the outcome.
The audit found that out of the over 400,000 crimes that were reported by the public in 2013, only 16% were detected, 69% undetected, and 14% were closed pending arrest of offenders. And on war against drugs, only 30% of reported dangerous drug cases were detected, 20% undetected, and 5% were closed. Usalama Reforms Forum consultant Charles Owino says security officers lack strategy to fight organized crimes, which is one of the greatest threats to community safety and national security.
We are really not putting the resources that we need to put in to deal with cases of drugs in this country. We are not putting our resources in detection, in knowing where they are coming from, who is bringing them in, who is involved in peddling them. We do not have enough mechanism in terms of following the money, because there are some of these cases you have to follow the money to know who is behind the drugs. So the police are stretched.
Of the report of crime management?
Whereas there are several laws and agencies that deal with various serious and organized crimes, there is an urgent need for a body that could coordinate and centralize the mandates of these agencies. The audit also found out that all serious and organized criminals in Kenyans have their own agents in law enforcement agencies.
The reason why we're proposing a national crime agency to deal with some of this, because of the problems, the gaps in our criminal intelligence system, and some of it also overspills to the National Intelligence Service functions. The main problem is a lack of capacity in terms of criminal intelligence. The truth is that we do not have a good criminal intelligence system in the National Police Service.
On criminal intelligence, the audit found out that the National Police Service lacked a model for data analysis and crime intelligence process that could facilitate significant crime reduction. It further noted that there was no active intelligence system to process information with determination for action. According to Usalama Reforms Forum audit, recent rise in crime and insecurity in the country have been as a result of criminal intelligence failures of prediction that accompanied police intelligence data and information handled by law enforcement agencies. Well, this is not the first time that Kenyan security and intelligence agencies have come under fire. Now, during the Westgate and Peketoni attacks that left several Kenyans dead and scores injured, made Kenyans question the intelligence over security apparatus. And it is upon the security intelligence agencies to up their game and gain credibility and confidence from Kenyans. Reporting for Ebro Africa News, I'm Brenda Zeda in Nairobi.
Almost a week after the brutal killing of a 14-year-old girl in Kwale by police, the Parliamentary Caucus on Human Rights has written to the Inspector General of Police asking him to suspend the officers involved in the killings. They have given the Director of Prosecution 1 week to charge the culprit, failure to which they will institute a private prosecution.
The brutal killing of a 14-year-old girl that sparked massive outrage in Kwale has put the National Police Service on the spot. While addressing the media, the Parliamentary Caucus on Human Rights says it has written to the Inspector General Police, David Kimayo, asking him to suspend the police officers implicated in the shooting.
Should the DPP not charge in court this week the implicated officers, we as the Parliamentary Caucus on Human Rights will move in the next week to apply for private prosecution proceedings. We will do our best to ensure the family gets justice in a bid to forestall cases of extrajudicial killings in the country.
Ndiwa MP Agostino Neto claims police are trying to cover up since witnesses are being barred from giving evidence on what transpired. The Human Rights Caucus wants the police chief to ensure all witnesses are protected.
We're working with the various lawyers to ensure that they hold briefed through the prosecution process, because the police are behaving funny. They are threatening the young witnesses. So we really think that if we do not move in right now as members of parliament, then perhaps in this particular case, and as in other cases of extrajudicial killings, there's not going to be justice. And that's the reason why we're adding our voice in this time and day.
The caucus has asked the government to address the issue on extrajudicial killings.
And look now at stories that are making headlines beyond the borders. And air travel to West Africa has been badly hit by the Ebola outbreak. The World Health Organization and the West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS, have both called for travel bans to be lifted, saying that medical screening should identify at-risk passengers instead.
Air travel to West Africa has been badly hit by the disease. 8 of the 11 international airlines serving Monrovia have suspended flights, including British Airways and Air France.
As we speak, the airport is having only 2 flights. We used to have a number of flights, and there were indications for other operators to come in. But because of the Ebola crisis in the country, a number of them have pulled out, and for now it's only SN Brussels and Air Maroc that are continuing their services.
Medical screening of passengers was also causing long delays at Monrovia's International Airport, but a 21-day quarantine thrown around the city's West Point neighborhood was lifted on Saturday.
The cancellation of airline flights has got a very negative impact on the people of Sierra Leone. I am one of the examples. It was only yesterday that I was able to actually get a ticket to travel to the United States. And there are a lot of people who are now stranded in town and at the airport because they cannot get an airplane to take them along.
At current infection rates, World Health Organization fears it could take 6 to 9 months and at least $490 million to bring under control, by which time over 20,000 people could be affected. In Liberia, which has been hardest hit by the outbreak with 694 deaths, the government has denied permission for any crew to disembark from ships docking at any of the country's 4 ports.
We know of Liberia, they exported the Ebola to Nigeria. We know of Guinea. We now talk of an Ebola case in Ivory Coast, Senegal, sorry. I mean, from Guinea, you know. So this has even strengthened our resolve to ensure that we keep the record of actually not allowing any person who has been affected to travel out.
The Ebola crisis has also cast doubt over a number of international football fixtures involving the worst-hit countries, with qualifying beginning next week for the 2015 Africa Cup of Nations. Meanwhile, Nigeria on Sunday confirmed a fresh case of Ebola in a doctor whose husband died from the virus, adding to a growing list of those providing healthcare in West Africa to be hit by the epidemic. The woman's husband was also a doctor who died in the city of Port Harcourt on August 22nd after treating a patient who had contact with the Liberian man who brought the virus in Nigeria in late July. Nigeria's medics have paid a heavy price in the outbreak. Of the 6 people who have died from the disease in Africa's most populous nation, 2 have been doctors and 2 others nurses. The World Health Organization has voiced concern about the unprecedented number of healthcare workers hit by the Ebola outbreak. More than 120 health workers have died and over 240 others infected so far.
It is now time for a short break, but don't go too far. Still to come. We tell you what is uniting Israeli and Palestinian children after a traumatic summer of war and death. 3D imagery technology unveiled in Japan. We bring you details on the application of this latest technological development.